So today's guests are Jack and Ben. And Jack and Ben, you are really inspirational because you have started a new normal, it's called, charity. And I don't want to preamble and rattle on about it. So whoever wants to go first, tell me a little bit about yourselves and how the charity came about.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem. So my name's Jack, and that's Ben. You'll meet Ben. Well, you've met him already. You'll hear from Ben very shortly. My dad, Dave, died in September 2013 of skin cancer when he was just 48 years old, and I was 22 at the time. Which, for anyone that's bereaved young will understand is a it's a difficult time in life anyway, your early 20s. But for me to have lost my soul, he was my everything. My dad was my everything. I've got an amazing mum who I dote on, and she's my life, and she's my everything. But my dad at that time just meant so much, in terms of friendship and guidance and everything that you'd expect from a dad in your early 20s. And then all of a sudden he was gone, and I didn't really have an outlet to turn to or someone that would understand, because anyone that I had in my life that was bereaved was a little older than me, didn't look like me, had different life experience to me. And it was a good 3 years post my dad dying. And then I met Ben, because I went and got my hair cut. Ben's a barber. So I traveled to Portobello Road from Essex, where I lived at the time, sat in his barber seat and told him about my dad, because that's what I do. I just talk about my dad. And Ben explained that his dad, Steve, was sadly dying of a brain tumor.
So your dad, Steve, Ben, was dying at the same time as you were working and you met Jack. Your father hadn't died yet.
Yeah, so I think it was, I know it was early summer 2015 when Jack came in to get a haircut. So my dad, Steve, had just been diagnosed with a brain tumor. And we had just found out actually a couple of weeks before Jack came in that it was terminal. So, I mean, I think he was 60 at the time when he was diagnosed. I think he had just turned 60. His birthday was early the year before, or late the year before, sorry. And I was 29 when he was diagnosed. He was, much in the same way that Jack and his dad had such a fantastic relationship. Myself and my dad were the same. We lived 100 miles apart, but we spoke 3 times a week on the phone. I made sure to call him whenever our football team had played. We spoke, about that and about whatever else was going on in his life and whatever else was going on in mine. And he was very much, I looked up to my dad. I really looked up to my dad. He was a really lovely, kind man. When he was diagnosed, it was a shock. It came out of nowhere. He was really fit and healthy. One day he went to work, so he was a bricklayer. One day he went to work and he picked up a brick and a trowel, and he said he just didn't know what to do with them anymore. And he just stood, in the middle of a building site holding a brick and a trowel, as he had done for 40 odd years before, and he said he just put him down and he walked off site and he went home, and that was when he knew something was really wrong.
That's really scary, but I just want to go back to that day. So as a hairdresser, we know that you're the forgotten counsellors, and often without a lot of support. I mean, people just come into your chair, and for some reason it's a given, isn't it? I do it as well. We go and have a really good dump on the people that can't escape us. They're there cutting our hair. I mean, I'm laughing because it is rather amusing, but it's not, because it can be really hard work. So you, Jack, had no idea, because you didn't know Ben, I'm assuming. You'd gone to get your hair cut. You had no idea that he is just embarking on a journey that you have just gone through.
No, that's right, Alex. And to be honest, I was fortunate in that I encountered someone exactly the same as me. And that's
where I just want to go back to that. So, Ben, did you tell Jack straight away that did it feel like, whoa, wait a minute, I don't want to hear this because my dad's going to die? Or what was the feelings around that? Sorry, Jack, I just capture that bit from Ben, because that's so, people do that and we don't know what other people are going through, do we?
Jack said it, and with no hesitation, I told him what was happening with my dad. I've never felt uncomfortable with sharing. I've never felt uncomfortable sharing things like that with my customers. And with Jack, I mean, look, I've been cutting Jack's hair for about half an hour, and we had been getting on like a house on fire, to be honest with you. And when he said it, it didn't feel out of sorts. I didn't feel uncomfortable. I just thought, oh, I'll talk to him. And I didn't, I remember back, I didn't think, oh God, that's a bit much. I just thought, oh, fair enough. Here's another man who wants to share, which is a rarity. You don't often get as fortunate to meet someone like Jack, who's willing to kind of open up quite so much on the first time of meeting them. But for me, I hold no issue with talking openly with people. So I was just happy to talk about it.
So you bonded, didn't you? Sorry, Jack.
As I was about to say, is that I was so fortunate in meeting someone in Ben who is just like me, and we were asked often, how do you do it? What's your best advice to people that don't? Ben and I are just two people that have always talked about our emotions, but even if you boil it down even further than that, we're just people that talk about our dads and how much we love our dads, and to me, I will never stop doing that. I know Ben's exactly the same. And that moment where I sat in Ben's chair, it wasn't like the next day of the rest of my life, because nothing had changed. I always talk about my dad. It's just lucky that the barber cutting my hair that day was Ben, because he could have been another barber and I'd have still spoke to him about my dad. It's just Ben is also built like me, and that's that he's open and he's honest and isn't ashamed to tell people, that he loves the man that made him. And that's why what we do is so successful, because we do really try and implement that into meetings and encourage people to speak so openly about their people.
Were you talking about your dad ever since he died? You've been talking about it, so you were that open about it all the way through, or is that something that grew as?
No, it's, to be honest, Alex, like I said, I spoke about my dad while he was alive. I tell my people about my dad all the time, and so the day he died, for me, that wasn't going to stop. He's still my dad. Still love him as much now as I did then. I still talk about him as much now as I did then. I just miss him a lot more. And I guess that comes across in our conversation. Again, I'm talking about myself, but I could be talking about Ben here as well. We're that fortunate that we found one another, because we really do share that belief. And, we're lucky. We appreciate that not everyone that grieves has such beautiful sentiments or beautiful words, and we see ourselves as as a privileged pair who are able to speak so lovingly about their loved ones, but also encourage those to speak about their people who perhaps haven't got that relationship or do long for them in a different way, or have perhaps resentment, or there's a dark cloud over their grief. So no, it wasn't something I decided to do. It was just a continuation of the life I was living, except now I'm living it without him.
And what does that talking about him do for you, Jack?
I just love my dad. Just love him. I can't tell you how much I love him, and I will always love him. So that conversation that I hold is for him. It's in his memory. It's to make me smile. It's to make me laugh. It's to make other people smile and laugh. It's to continue his memory. Ultimately, it's to keep him present. So it keeps him close to you. Yeah. Well, the day I stop talking about my dad is the day that people forget about him. It's the day that I lose touch with him. I have to sometimes check in on myself just to make sure that I remember what his face looks like. I'll have a look at some photos that I've not seen in a while. But his memory, his voice, his stories, they live on forever, because I just simply won't stop talking about him.
And to you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a multitude of reasons as to why I keep talking about my dad. But the two main ones for me are that, I miss my dad, and he was an idiot, and I want to tell the world that he was an idiot, but he was my idiot. And the other reason as well is because I realised the power of us talking about our dads. I realised that us speaking about them allows other people to find their strength to speak about the people that they miss, or the people that they've lost. As Jack rightly says, not every relationship is as fortunate, not everyone is as fortunate to have the relationships that we've had, but we want people to know that it's okay to speak regardless of that relationship. And so, you know, talking about him is, you know, twofold. It's for me, and it's, you know, it's for everyone else. But look, my dad was, you know, he was my idiot, and I love him to bits, and I'll never stop talking about him. And much like Jack, you know, I boast about how good my dad was at laying bricks. Not that anyone cares, but I care, you know, and I want to tell people about that, and I'll always tell people about that.
Do you have the sad side as well? Are there times when you just cry and you just miss him, and do you draw on each other at those times? Because there are sad times, aren't there, when you're just missing?
I never am not sad, but it's a different type of sadness to what I think people assume sadness is. Like, it's not that I walk around feeling morose the whole time because my dad's not here. It's just that I missed someone, you know, and that never really leaves you. There are, of course, days where, you know, when you're tired, when you're exhausted, you know, that grief swells inside of you. You know, you become more exposed to that kind of raw emotion. And those are the days when, you know, TV advert sets you off because there's a father and a son, or you're watching a movie, or, you know, you walk down a street and a kid and his dad are going to play football, you know, and you just think, you know, and that obviously that makes me, that will make me cry. But, you know, ultimately that emotion sits in the pit of your stomach all of the time. It's there. It's, you know, some days it's completely benign, and others it's really apparent. You know.
And what I was going to say to you is, really, I think, I mean, I don't know how unusual you are. I just know that most of some of my son's friends, as they've got older, and I don't know if it's because they're getting into their 30s, they perhaps talk more. They're, you know, my son's similar age to you guys. They probably talk more about their emotions now as they've got older. But younger guys, and I think we talked about this, where I said to you, I think that between 18 and 24, it's kind of that they don't fit into the child bereavement group, but they don't really, some of them are still at home, they're at uni, whatever. They're not fully engaged with the adult kind of bereavement world, and perhaps some of them don't even want it. And I don't know, do you think it's harder as a man of that age to express your grief? Not necessarily for you, but is that your experience of young guys, that perhaps it's not, they don't do it as much as women?
I mean,
girls.
So I was 22 when Dad died, and I was just 22. You know, I'd only just turned 22, and I think it was like 15 days later my dad died. So I absolutely hear what you're saying. I was on a call with Ben yesterday, and I sort of explained that I felt like I was 19 for about 5 years. I'll be honest. I feel like I was frozen in time without my dad, you know, because my dad did everything for me as well. He was, you know, like I said, he was everything to me. Like, he really was. And when he died, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through life without him. Like, honestly, I was like, how am I going to do normal things without my dad in my life? And, you know, thankfully, I was brought up to speak about my emotions by my mum and dad. You know, I was in a very open household where, you know, conversation was encouraged. And I think there's almost like a dangerous precedent to say people like Ben and I are unusual, or you know, a break in the mold, or celebrated for speaking, because I think what that does is it kind of recognizes that the other side of the conversation, i.e. those that aren't having the conversation, aren't, you know, dealing with it. And what we're trying to do is encourage people to speak, and it's not a big deal to speak about your emotions. You know, what we don't want to say is, oh, it's amazing that you speak, because it kind of puts it on this platform where it's like this, you know, an amazing feat.
I suppose what I'm saying is that in my experience, it's usually women. I'd love to know why that is. Do you think there's an unspoken pressure then? Because it is unusual to get so that you're young and so open. And I don't, when I say that, I'm not meaning it's unusual to have the feelings. I think everybody has the feelings. It's just this kind of like almost like an expected thing that young men don't show their emotions as much, maybe, which makes it very dangerous.
We live in a society which has taught men that strength comes in silence and physicality. You know, when you're a young woman, you're encouraged to kind of speak openly about your emotions. As a young man, you're not told to do that, right? You know, I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. I was not encouraged to talk about my emotions. I was not told to tell people how I felt. You know, I was brought up in quite you know, I was brought up on football terraces. I was brought up around, you know, what would have been considered to be, you know, real men. You know, these men down the pub watching football, you know, fighting, and that's not what we should be considering masculinity to be anymore. You know, Jack and I have a belief that true strength in men comes in their ability to be open, to be honest, and their willingness to listen and learn from others. And then to educate others as well. You know, we have to debunk this kind of idea that strength is a physical thing, or is a thing of silence.
Like big boys don't cry. Nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a completely ludicrous thing. But this is a systemic issue. You know, this is thousands of years where we've been kind of taught that masculinity is this thing. And you know, I think Jack and I aren't any different. I mean, individually, we went on journeys with our own kind of mental health earlier on. You know, I had some things that I did. Jack had some things that he did. We both saw therapists. You know, before we met, before we came together to do this. And so, you know, maybe we had a degree of awareness of ourselves that we saw things that we didn't. I know that I did. I saw things I didn't like in my behavior that I wanted to change. And but I think that for as long as we keep telling men that masculinity is molded in this way, then we can't make changes. I do think that there are younger generations now who are kind of breaking that a little bit and who are changing that. And I definitely think that when we look at kind of younger generations and we see, you know, different communities and their kind of willingness to break away from societal norms, you know, like we look at gender structures now, and people like, I read something the other day that said that, you know, something in the region of about 80% of young people don't care about gender. You know, a fantastic thing. You know, and that's these things, these systemic things that we've created for us to be able to change how men behave and how openly men speak about their emotions and their grief and their mental health. We have to break down these boundaries that we've set ourselves.
So there you are, you're in the hairdresser's chair, you become friends. And then when did this idea come about? How did it?
I'm quite happy to admit I had a bit of a mental breakdown in around about December 2017. And my lovely mum, who is, you know, a big part of the reason why we're having this conversation now, Gaynor Baxter, she's the most wonderful person. She said, like, this is enough now, enough is enough. And see, I've struggled with anxiety. I've lived with anxiety my whole life, actually, even before my dad died. And she found this wonderful program online. It was like a residential stay where they kind of taught you about anxiety and explained what it was and what it is and how it just empowers you, you know, and it doesn't have to be something that you're scared of. And I was sat there and I was looking at this word, grief and death and my dad and all of the problems that have come in losing someone so young. And I just thought, you know I'm not the only one, because I speak to Ben all the time. And I think there must be more people in the world that feel like I do. And, you know, I'd like to speak to those people, and I'd like for Ben to, you know, be with me. And I think we've got something here that we can take to the wider masses. So I spoke to Ben after this residential anxiety club, as I call it, and Ben said, yeah, this is great. And we got our heads together over dinner in Hoxton, and before we knew it, Ben had found a space in Angel in a like a community centre, and we were running our Good Grief meetings for the first time in May 2018. Now, Good Grief is a safe space. It looked entirely different then, but it started out, as it continues, it was a safe space for young adults at the time to gather and to speak about their grief and their loss and their love. And yeah, we were running physical meetings whenever we could get a space in this this youth centre, which was basically when there wasn't a Zumba class or when there wasn't a yoga class. And the guy who's Ben's contact, forgive me, I forget his name, Ben will remind us, but he'd phone Ben and say, right, you can do it then. And that's when we'd do it. And we'd hold space for others for 2 hours, but also importantly, hold space for ourselves as well, and remember our people and remember our dads and share stories and laugh and cry.
How did you advertise this?
Instagram. Yeah, we used our social medias. We just used our Instagrams, and we had, I think at that first meeting, we had about 8 of us there, and we had loads of people like message us being like, "Oh, I'm going to come. This is great." And I remember beforehand, and I think Jack refers to it as the only time that he saw me having a bit of a worry. But I was like, beforehand, I was like, I mean, I don't have birthday parties for a reason, and it's because of what I felt before this. So, God, what if no one turns up? What if it's just me and you sat in this room? You know, we ended up having about 8 of us there. And do you know what, actually, Jack? I was just listening to what you were saying, and I think the only difference between then and now, because we did the introduction, you know, we did everything was the same. The conversation would have been the same. Like, the only thing that was different was that we were in a community centre in Angel.
And also, I think that probably that I was talking far too much, because I felt as well, Alex, that the muzzle was off, you know, and I got so excited. I held probably about 90% of that space while everyone just listened about my dad. But you know, it was. Do you know what? It's probably, I look back as one of my proudest days, actually, because it really is the start of forever for us, and hopefully the whole community of, you know, people that are bereaved, whether young or old, and you know what we're trying to do for people that have mental health issues as well, and you know, like myself with the anxiety, just connecting and empowering, and yeah, it was amazing, really, because it was a moment in time that it felt monumentous at the time, didn't it, mate? But I don't think we really appreciated what was coming.
I don't think, you know, to be honest with you, Alex, you know, we sort of sat over dinner in Hoxton speaking about this, and really flippantly went, and it was really flippantly, you know, you have to bear in mind, we didn't really have a clue what we were talking about. We went, should we just start a charity? You know, and that was that, and that was it. And, you know, I think the wonderful thing is that, so there is a third person who founded the charity with us, our very, very good friend called James, who you'll never see him. He will never be in front of a camera, but he effectively is he's the engine room. You know, so Jack and I went, oh, we're going to do this, and we're going to start a charity, and James went, okay, cool, and then had to get to doing all of the hard work.
And that is such hard work to get a charity established. I know this.
To be,
yeah,
you know,
it's a nightmare.
we founded in May 2018, but we were officially a charity in January 2020, and it took James and some fantastic lawyers who worked alongside us. You know, it took them a year working with the Charity Commission to get that through. And to be honest with you, I mean, we didn't have a clue what we were doing. No, we didn't have a clue. You know, and fast forward, I mean, we're not even 3 years on, but we've clocked up 200 meetings. You know, we hold space for a number of different things. As Jack was saying, there's, you know, multiple meetings for different grievers from different communities.
Yes, tell us about those. Tell us the meetings that you have. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
So when we started out, we had Good Grief, which was effectively, you know, this, Jack and I wanted to bring together people to speak in the same way about the people that they lost, in the same way that we did about our dads, which was, you know, bringing forward a positive spin on your grief, and trying to appreciate all of the good things about, you know, loss, which worked for a bit. And then when we moved to virtual meetings last March, when the world went into lockdown, we continued holding these meetings. So we were running two a week of just Good Grief meetings. And after a little bit, we got speaking with some of the people who were attending meetings, and they sort of spoke to us about other spaces that maybe they felt they needed. And the first space that came around was after the sort of death of George Floyd. We did quite a lot of research into sort of POC communities to understand their kind of access to mental health services. So the first meeting that we set up away from Good Grief was Black and Brown Good Grief, which is a safe space for people of colour. The second space that we set up was It's Complicated, which is a space for people who have lost people through estranged relationships, or people who've taken their own lives, or they've lost them through addiction. We have people attend that group who have lost people through homicide. It's a really interesting, diverse space. So obviously Good Grief doesn't really fit well with some of those stories. And since then, we've also added Boys Talk, which is a men's mental health group. So that is an open group to anyone who wants to speak about their mental health. We've also added Queer Good Grief, which is a safe space for our queer community, so the LGBTQ plus community. And we've just added Girls Talk as well, which is the same as Boys Talk. It's a space for women to come together to speak about their mental health. So there's quite a few groups, and Lockdown Loss is the newest one that is launching in April, which is a space for people who have lost someone during the pandemic.
I mean, it's just fantastic. And as I was saying to you, I'd love you to do Dad's loss. And I know there'd have to be Mum's loss as well, but somehow with the WAY community, there tends to be, I think, from my experience, more women going to these things than there are men. And when I've spoken to men, it's quite often because if they've been left with children, it's really difficult for them to then get out and attend things, because the new running of a household and perhaps maintaining a job, there's very little space. But to have something online as well that they can join and do when the kids are sleeping, and just not to be so isolated, is an amazing thing. So I think there's a gap there for you guys. Just put that in case I forget.
The way that the pandemic has changed our charity is incredible. We went from 4 meetings last March, 4 physical meetings last March. We now have 23 meetings a month.
Yeah.
We have hosts from around the world. We have people joining us from around the world. So to be able to offer more space to more people, like you say, people who, we were a London-centric charity. We're not anymore. We're a global charity that anyone can access. And that wouldn't have happened without the pandemic.
No.
But this is an opportunity for us to listen to people like yourself, to acknowledge that there are people out there who need these spaces and who might not be able to access them physically. So, yeah.
Because I think,
on board.
I don't know how you feel about it. You both said that you had therapy, and as a counsellor myself, I've kind of felt that, and it's just my experience of working with people, I've always felt that counselling can have a place if you've got something more complicated, or if when I've worked with people who perhaps had a murder, there's other bits that come in, aren't there, that need to be talked about. Ambiguous loss is another area that perhaps you need more support. But I've never been sure that people actually need what we call counselling or 50-minute sessions when they're bereaved, because I think with bereavement it's a bit of a roller coaster, and on some of the days when they've made an appointment to come and see me, a friend might turn up. It might be a beautiful day like today and say, would you like to go for a walk in the park? And they think, actually, I feel really good. I could do with the walk in the park. But then they have to go to their counselling. Whereas I think having something that's available as well in the lonely hours, when people can just log in and they know there might be somebody. So my guess is if you've gone worldwide, this will spread and people will have access to groups that are perhaps running when yours is not, because of where we are located, is a really useful thing, just to know that there is somebody that you can talk to. Because like I say, I don't know that we all need bereavement counselling, but I definitely think that people need support and peer support, and to be able to access information and to know that they're not going crazy, because grief is crazy, isn't it? Some of the thoughts that people have, they can't express because they're frightened.
Absolutely. I think with therapy, so I'm someone that had therapy. I've had therapy on and off for 7 years, and I think I will always have my therapist's number in my phone, knowing that it's there. But that's at the moment, that's the purpose it serves, because I think in Good Grief, and in Ben, and in everyone that we've met through the conversation that we're holding, I've found my outlet now to exercise the demon that is the bad side to my grief, because I do honestly think there's a lot of good as well to grieving, and maybe that's something we'll speak on later. I think there's a lot of beauty in the loss and the sentiment and the empathy that you gain, but in the darker side to grief, I know that I have people that understand. And you're right, Alex, I don't, my therapy never looked like bereavement counselling necessarily. It just looked like talking me through life's problems that I was encountering without my dad, with a welcoming arm and a smile. But the person I spoke to didn't understand, because she didn't look like me, with respect that she wasn't my age, she wasn't male, she didn't have tattoos or like the same music that I liked or wear Dr. Martens, and all of a sudden in Ben, I found this guy who's like, bloody hell, we're very similar, and he loves his dad as much as I do, and he feels the same way. That's wicked, because so do I, and I don't feel as silly now. So therapy, I think, is great. And I will always have my therapist number, like I said, ready, knowing that if I need to speak to her, I can. But at the same time, I think the conversation being held with other young people who understand, and I could text Ben at any time in the day, and I know that he'd get back to me as soon as possible. It's not a case of having to make an appointment. All of our meetings they run 4 days a week, and they're free to attend. And outside of those meetings, you are welcome to connect with the fellow attendees and start your own community, start your own WhatsApp chats that we know exist, where people share all sorts of resources and Instagram posts and looking after one another, which is ultimately why we set out to do this, to build the community, to let people know that there are Bens in the world for you to, there are Jacks in the world for you to meet, to befriend, and to understand your struggle.
How do you look after them though? Because obviously, coming from a kind of a counselling perspective, how do you make sure it's safe? How do you safeguard it? And how is that?
It's an interesting one. I mean, we run in the same way that the fellowships run. So we acknowledge the fact that this is peer-to-peer support. So we do have safeguarding policy in place. If we think there's someone in the meeting that could cause harm to themselves, we'll speak with them immediately after the meeting. Everyone that also runs our groups or hosts our groups, they are regular attendees that we will speak to. We take them away. We do a little bit of work with them to make sure that they feel comfortable. But ultimately, this is peer-to-peer. And we do everything we can to make sure that people feel safe and comfortable in those groups. I think one of the things that we do an introduction at the very beginning. And one of the things that we say in the introduction is that we ask everyone to be kind to themselves and others in the meeting, which if we feel that isn't happening, then we can speak with that person and we can work with that person away from there. But I just wanted to touch on the therapy. I had, my therapy personally wasn't for grief. It was for I was quite an aggressive young man, and I wanted to work on my anger, and I spent 18 months kind of working on that when I was in my mid to late 20s, about 26, 27. For me, we are not an alternative to therapy. We are another option alongside still working on other things, because it would be a lie if Jack and I said that we didn't go and speak to someone as well. Jack and I go and have supervision. We speak with someone once a month. We spend an hour and a half with someone to make sure that we're okay, that we're doing the right things. If there's anything that we need to talk about, we also have another space to do that. So, this is alongside. We really do champion speaking as much as you can to kind of understand what's going on. There are things that come up in the group that perhaps I would say the 99.9% of what comes up in the group, there is somebody else in that group who understands you. That's the point of peer-to-peer. It's to connect those people so you're not feeling alone, so you can get another perspective of something that's going on. But for the 0.1% that maybe somebody doesn't understand, or that there's not someone there, we still think that you need to go and to have therapy, to speak with somebody else, and we do really encourage that.
I just think sometimes it's expensive. Not everyone can access it.
I mean, this is
You
why.
know, so yeah.
You know, we think, this is our opinion. We don't think that everyone thinks like this, or you know, we're not going to frog march everyone into thinking like it. Our opinion is that mental health services should be provided for free.
I agree.
You know, it's you know, there are running fields outside that people can go and run in and not be charged. It shouldn't be any different for your mental health to your physical health. You know, I know that's quite an easy thing to sort of say, but that's why we do what we do, because we want to be able to offer a service to people. You know, when we speak to people and they've been sat on an NHS waiting list for 6, 12, 18 months, and you think that's not fair. You know, it's not fair on that individual, and it's not the NHS's fault. That's the demand. There isn't enough there. But, you know, for us, we can provide a service because, you know we can, and why wouldn't we?
So what do you do in your day jobs? Because this is not your job, is it? You're saying you both work. So what do you do?
So I'm an assistant producer. I work for Sky Sports, and I have done. I got, so you know, another life ago, this was my dream job, and I got the job the month before my dad died. So this has been the one constant you can say since my dad died, is that I've had this job that I work from Tuesday through till Saturday. You know, it's a live television environment. It's very stressful. There's a high pressure, but it allows me the life away from work to run a charity, and I will be forever indebted to everyone at Sky for their support in what we do as well, because they have been big supports to us and what we do. And yeah, it's you're right, Alex. It's a fine balance, and you do have to check in on yourself at times to make sure that you are giving yourself enough downtime. And you know, Ben will admit, and we have this conversation often, I'm better than he is at giving myself a bit of time off, because well, for whatever reason, Ben will tell you his story. He's a fanatic, which is why Ben's so brilliant. But you know, it's a finite art to getting that balance right and not running yourself into the ground, because it can happen. And we spoke yesterday quite openly about burnout, and you know, you really do have to remember that we are still grieving too. You know, it's not a case that we know what we're doing, although we feel like we can give good direction. We still have to look after ourselves too.
And with you, Ben, you still hairdressing now? Yeah.
So myself and a couple of friends, we actually own I suppose a chain of hair salons. So we have 6 of those in the city of London.
Wow.
Around the city. So yeah. So that's. I mean, I still cut hair 3 days a week, and then the other 4 days a week run a business and a charity with Jack. And yeah, that's what we do. But it's, you know, much like Jack, like I find the space to be able to do what we need to do. You know, my business, we've been fortunate enough, I suppose, during the pandemic that I've been closed for quite a lot of it. So that's kind of allowed us to sort of push on in what we're doing a bit more. But you know, I will always make sure that I have the time to do everything that I need to do. You know, that's important for me to be able to find that time.
So I mean, really, then this eventually is going to take over, isn't it? It's going to become the business, really.
So that's the plan.
And it won't be too long.
Well, I mean, you know, I think we were on a call yesterday, and you know, obviously 23 meetings a month sounds like a lot, but to Jack and I, it really is just scratching the surface. You know, times that by 10 and add a few more every single month, and then we're getting close to where we'd be happy. You know, I think there will become a point in the next couple of years where we're gonna, you know, we haven't fundraised yet. This has all been done really with nothing. You know, just goodwill of people and a willingness to kind of help one another and others. You know, there is going to come a point where you know it kind of does take precedent, and I think the likelihood is that we'll try and raise some money, and hopefully some people will think that it's a good idea what we're doing, and they'll help us fundraise, and we'll be able to start kind of transferring over to making this a full-time occupation, to as we say, to offer mental health services for free to as many people around the world as we possibly can.
It's fantastic. Do you know what? I just feel really privileged to listen to you both and to have met you. And honestly, I just can't believe all that you're achieving. It's magnificent, really. And it really is the power of love that's driving you, isn't it?
Exactly. Absolutely. This is what I wanted to say, and thank you so much, Alex, for your kind words, because it does mean a lot. And what you really do have to appreciate and understand is that all Ben and I are doing, and all we have done from the start, from the day that I sat in his barber chair, all we have done is spoken about our dads, and that's all we continue to do. And we really appreciate the praise, and we really appreciate everyone's lovely words. But for Ben and I, it's always very difficult to well, is it difficult to accept? I don't think so. It's appreciated.
We are having a conversation, and we're setting up other like we can't take too much credit because it's not just us. It's every single person who comes into that space and sits there and listens or speaks. It's the people who send out the emails for the meetings. It's the people who put their hands up to host. It's the wonderful people who are involved in looking after our social media and creating content. It's really not Jack and I. I don't think we can take too much credit, to be honest. We're just we are literally just talking about our dads.
I bet your mums are so proud of you. I find it overwhelming. I'm like, because all the time in the 35 years that I've worked with bereavement, I have thought about, I wish that this could start. And, for lots of times I've tried to start things, and that red tape, that getting to be a charity is, thank goodness you have James as well, because, it's a nightmare, and it's such an achievement to get to charity status. So I really hope, we'll put this out there, and I really hope that you get some fantastic financial sort of sponsors or something to help you to make this grow across the world, really, because that's where it needs to be. It's fantastic.
Do I didn't realise how difficult it was to become a charity, and even when James was doing it, I still didn't really take it. And myself and my partner, she was a representative for the company that she works at a gala dinner in December 2019, so just before we became a charity in January 2020. And we were at this gala dinner for a foundation, and they said at the start of the meal, we're so proud, after 21 years, we've finally been able to become a charity. And I sat there and thought, 21 years? James is nearly finished.
I know, and it's hard. I abandoned it, to be honest, because I could not manage all of the stuff that you have to do. So well done, James, and shame you can be here, but I'm going to look forward to meeting James at some point. And guys, thank you so much. Tell me now, how can people get in touch if they're watching this and they think, I want to help, or I want to come along?
So we have a website, thenewnormalcharity.com. That's, I guess, the old hat way of finding us, but the best way, as always, is on social media, and that's on Instagram at TNN Charity. It's the same on Twitter, although we need to be better at our tweets. Otherwise, the Instagram inbox, the emails, the website is all manned by somebody from TNN, so we will always reply as soon as possible. And we just want to say that if anyone's watching this who feels like they're isolated and feels like they're alone with their grief, Ben said something so profound on a call with you, actually, Alex, a couple of days ago, that I think we'll probably adopt moving forward. And that's that if there's one, there's two. You are not alone. And that is so important to remember. I wasn't alone. I felt like I was, and I wasn't. I found Ben a few miles down the road cutting hair. And, we are now connecting people all over the world, like you've rightly said. And, if there's one, there's two, and there will be more. So please do give us a chance, because for a lot of people, for 450 plus people, it's been the best decision they've made since they lost their person. And, I am one of those people, and I know it. I am the proof in the pudding, because, as is Ben, we're very open and happy in our grief now, which is, a delight to be able to say.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you.
No, thank you for having us.
We'll talk again, no doubt.
Definitely.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.